Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The preseason is over. What have we learned? Plus, the Lakers make a popular roster move. All of that next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free and never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the channel. Andy, all of whom are excited for the season to be starting, which happens in, depending on when you are watching or listening to this, give or take 24 hours, 26 hours, something like that. So we're there. And the Lakers capped the preseason by making a roster move that I'm not sure everyone, I should say, necessarily saw coming. So we will get to that. Quincy Olivari is now a two-way Laker, and Colin Castleton is a street free agent. So we'll talk about that later. But let's get into the preseason, Andy, because we both had said that this was an important one for the Lakers. You're bringing back the same roster, so you want to capitalize on continuity. You also have a new coaching staff. You have a very difficult early season slate of games, basically as part of a very difficult schedule overall because you are a Western Conference team. What were your big impressions of the preseason? Was it a good one? Was it a bad one? Last year, I know you hated the preseason and everything about it.
Yes, I did. And this preseason, I thought was more productive. And if nothing else, I liked the mindset of it much more than last year. And frankly, much more than the last several preseasons, maybe the most since going back to LeBron and Anthony Davis's first season together, willing to give them a bit of a pass in the training camp following the pandemic because everything was compressed. But this was the first time in a while it felt like the team as a whole was actually treating the preseason with a sense of purpose. That being said, I thought things grew a little bit less focused as the preseason went along. I would have liked to have seen LeBron play in a bit more of it, even if I can understand the reasons that he didn't. I would have liked to have seen more of it. And we'll get into the positives and negatives of what we saw on individual and I guess team-wide bases. But in terms of the overall treatment of this time, if, at the very least, even if they didn't make the absolute most of it, they seem to give a bleep in ways that I hadn't seen in a while. And that in and of itself made me happy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was a much more constructive training camp this year than others. Obviously, we don't see everything that's going on inside practices, but reading the vibes when you're down in El Segundo, watching the shooting afterwards, when you hear guys talking, like the enthusiasm for the new coaching staff, I think is pretty genuine. And I think it didn't look perfect in the preseason. It very rarely does for any team. But I think you're seeing the kind of the outlines of what this group is going to look like with JJ Redick, particularly offensively. And I think those are pretty decent trends. I compare it to two things. I compare it to last year, and I 1,000% agree with you. It is a way more productive and way better training camp this year than last. And the other thing I compare it to is what it would have looked like if they'd brought Darvin back. And like, have they tried? He said, let's, he had one really good year, one kind of iffy year. Let's give it a year 3. And I think that change, whether it works out that Redick is the right answer, we'll see. But just that change, that understanding that you could not go again. Fair, unfair, smart, or right, wrong, whatever. You could not do that again. And so I think from that standpoint, especially, the Lakers are in a much better place now than they certainly could have been if they had, not done, I think, a relatively difficult thing when you consider all the coaching turnover that they had.
And then if you start looking just under the hood in terms of the details, the things that we liked about the preseason, didn't like about them, I'd say my number one takeaway in terms of things that both pleased me and also I think are really important, Anthony Davis looks really ready and really in rhythm for a very strong season. His preseason numbers, roughly 22 points, 9.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a steal and a block in just under 26 minutes per game. If you converted those to his per 36 numbers, which is basically what Anthony Davis plays per game in a regular season, you're looking at roughly 31, 13, and 3.5, plus 1.5 steals, 2 blocks, give or take. Like, those are MVP level numbers. And in a preseason where the Lakers went,
I doubt he'd still finish in the top 5.
okay.
Let me rephrase it this way. Anthony Davis thinks he could put up those numbers and not finish in the top 5.
Right. And it's interesting. He talks all the time about how he doesn't care about the individual accolades, but because he always lets us know that the voters don't like him for whatever reason, we also know that he, in fact, cares a lot about these individual awards that he, particularly Defensive Player of the Year, which he just seems at times startlingly out of the conversation. But the way he played in this preseason, other than his free throws, he shot up like 52, 53% from the line, which I don't think is going to continue in the regular season.
Correct. But he's too good a free throw shooter. That'll correct.
Right. Just letting people know, if that continued, that is clearly a problem. I just don't think it will.
Yes, it is.
In the same way that, the 4 of 9 from behind the arc in his last preseason game, I am also not predicting, both in terms of takes or makes, will continue. But overall, the guy that I think is the Lakers' best player on both sides of the ball, certainly over 82 games, and who needs to be the best player on this team on both sides of the ball over 82 games. He just looked fantastic.
Yeah, and it's not just the production, it's like the confidence with the jumper, which has looked good. Mm-hmm. I'm not even talking about the 3-pointer, which I like the idea of him taking 2 or 3 a game, maybe if he's hitting 33, 34, 35%, and it kind of keeps him confident and in a rhythm and all that stuff. I can live with maybe 1 extra 3-pointer than maybe I like, because of the extra, the benefit he gets from feeling confident in everything that he's doing. It's going to make him better everywhere else on the floor. So I'm cool with that. And, but that jumper from 16 feet, 18 feet, 22 feet, whatever it is, like, those are really important shots for him to be able to take and make, because when he is hitting that, he is really difficult to guard anyway. I mean, it's not even like the jumper's a little off. It's not like Anthony Davis becomes, an easy check for anybody on the other team. Throw whatever body you want at him because, like, he's just off his game. That ain't how it works. But when he is hitting that shot, it's basically impossible to guard him. And impossible to guard AD is the guy that we are looking for over the course of the season. And so there is one more thing about AD and how he functioned in the preseason that I do want to make a note of in the next segment. But just to finish this out, like, I was worried about the Olympic thing, not so much that it would take his legs out for the entire season, but that it might slow down his kind of rolling into the season. Maybe he just eases into it, all these things. And the Lakers, with that hard schedule, I was worried maybe that could cost them a game or two. If anything, the concern now is, does he run out of gas maybe at the end of the year? But he is primed to start the year in incredible form.
He seems like a shark, like the idea that if I stop moving at all, I die, because he seems every bit in shape now. Like, the conditioning just continued from Team USA straight through training camp and the preseason. Like, it has not felt like anything has been, forget ramped up, just slowed down. Yeah, it's just felt like LeBron talked about this idea that, he's felt incredible. heading into training camp just from the Olympic run. And, you and I mentioned in a show last week, just the idea that these guys, as opposed to the effect we saw with Austin Reeves, these guys are experienced with what it is to be in the NBA, to have these types of seasons, but also to do it coming off Team USA.
Yeah.
So, while I don't think it was out of line or panicking for either one of us to be concerned about that, it's very clear both of them know what they're doing.
Yeah. And but there's one more in terms of Anthony Davis and JJ Redick. One thing I want to get into before a couple other good things and bad things from the preseason. Of course, some Quincy Olivari talk. All of that coming up.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp. October is the month where we celebrate wearing masks, different costumes, appearing like someone else. But there are times where we feel like we're wearing a mask more often than we want to, at work, social settings, around family. And therapy can help you accept all the parts of yourself so you can take off the mask, because masks are for Halloween fun, but not for our emotions. Spooky season should not feel like a year-round event. And I can personally attest to how much therapy helped me and my family during a really difficult period, just helping us learn the best ways to communicate and to make compromises without feeling unsatisfied or unheard, and just to get the best version of yourself, not just for yourself, but for the people in your life. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, whatever reason. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
So, quick reminder, make another Locked On podcast your second listen of the day. I still think it is a great time to try the Locked On NBA podcast, given where we are in the beginning of the regular season, jump around, get a feel for everything going on around the league. So the other thing that I really liked about this preseason was it is very clear to me that Redick is extraordinarily conscious of avoiding those stretches that we saw last year where AD seemed to disappear from the offense. I get the impression that Redick will stop what they're doing and break some of the things that they want to do overall, even if sort of the flow of the ball is like, you know what, we're getting good shots, we're getting good possessions, we're getting what we're looking for. I think he would break those things off if 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 possessions go and AD isn't getting the ball and isn't getting the touches and isn't getting the feel and all that kind of stuff. Again, even if it is within the flow of what they want to do, I think that emphasis from Redick, and he mentioned it a couple of times, of we call play get the ball in his hands, is going to be critically important this year.
I agree with you. I happen to think that the amount of times that it feels like the offense is in the flow and they're getting good shots without AD touching the ball are going to be pretty minimal anyway.
Sure.
And I think in a lot of ways, one will directly.
Oh, I think so too. I just meant like even if it's not, like sometimes it's not working. People aren't being aggressive enough. They're not. It is a fault of execution or of play calling or whatever it might be that Davis isn't. Other times, sometimes it's just like 2 or 3 or 4 possessions go by and like everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. The defense is shading AD one way, and so you go the other. And you're operating things properly. I think even in those situations, he'll define what is good in part by, is Anthony Davis getting the ball? So in that sense, that's what I'm getting at.
I don't disagree with that part of it. I just think, were I to guess the amount of times that JJ Redick thinks it's functioning well without AD touching the ball, I think is going to be pretty minimal.
Yeah, that's possible for sure. The other thing I thought definitely you could see a difference in, I do not know if it's going to carry into the regular season in ways that are going to translate into winning basketball, because every move has a counter move and a downside and things like that. But the emphasis on rebounding was palpable. And especially when you start breaking down, like, what did Rui Hachimura do, for example, in the preseason? You could tell the emphasis was there for sure.
he averaged 7 rebounds per game in just under 24 minutes during the preseason. Though, if those were maintained, that clip on the boards, it would equal career highs, I think, pretty easily for Rui. And I think it's more than just what it does for the team, what it potentially does for the defense, ending possessions, the load off incrementally LeBron or AD. It just feels like it reflects more of an attention to detail by Rui. And JJ Redick has talked about Rui being really dialed in during what they refer to as the classroom portions of training camp. And I'm a big proponent of Rui and think there's a lot that he can do well. But if there is a weakness sort of him overall as a player, I would say it's kind of a flightiness and just not paying attention to some of the ancillary things happening around him and some of the more granular details that do matter. And I don't think that paying more attention to the glass means all of a sudden Rui is going to become 10 times the more attentive defender than he has been in the past. But if he's, say, 2 or 3 times more, that makes a difference. Even if he still remains an imperfect defender, it's kind of like what we've talked about with D'Angelo Russell and the vow to pay more attention to some of the stuff happening off ball or boxing out, which to his credit, D'Lo did a lot of in the preseason. It's not going to make him a perfect player in terms of his weaknesses, but incremental improvement, incremental attention, it can add up in ways that help.
Yeah, I think, was it the Phoenix game? He talked about like the difference in the first half and the second half in terms of transition defense and stuff like that. Like,
yes.
Their ability to follow that blueprint and still keep other teams from getting out on the break, which would cause the Lakers to then have to back off a little bit or whatever it might be. Like, I once the real games get going, interested to see like how much can they do these things, where are there holes that open up, how long do they stay with certain things that they want to do because they just need to get the reps in with the hopes that eventually the good things will happen. For example, 3-point shooting, if they continue to shoot as poorly as they did in the preseason, and man, it was bad, but let's just say they do, they're not going to stop trying to shoot 36, 37, 38 a night. Like they're not going to suddenly go back to 31 or 32 because they're not falling at the beginning of the season. And you're going to have to go through a little bit of that uncomfortable space where it's not working the way you want. Maybe there's something that you've been doing, like an old an old way or an old habit that you have that inclination to go back to as players. Redick obviously doesn't have that. He's not going with last year's blueprint, but the players will feel a tug towards something if new things aren't working. And so that's just human nature. And so as a group, how they go through that is going to be, and how Redick handles those things is something that I'm looking forward to, because it's sort of the first tests. Even more, the rotation is pretty straightforward for the Lakers right now.
Yeah.
It's those kinds of things where it's like coaching feel that I know I'm looking for, and I'm sure a lot of other observers of the Lakers are doing the same.
Yeah, we've talked before about how I think as the games start to count, the team is going to be a little bit more judicious in some of the threes that they take. There's likely some experimentation going on. Like Alex Regula, friend of the show of Silver Screen and Roll, has a good piece up right now about how Max Christie, his 3-point percentage is about 30% in the preseason, which clearly is not good enough and also far below what he's typically done. It is likely in part because he's taken way more off the dribble threes,
right?
Like off the dribble pull-up threes than he typically does during the regular season. He's taken fewer catch and shoot threes where he's often quite good. That's going to bring down his percentages.
I hope to see a little bit more out of Max once the games are going. He's more put into, hopefully slotted into exactly what he wants to do. It wasn't, he had that great first game like a lot of players did. And I'm hoping he kind of tailed off a little bit after that.
I think that were I to guess, just because Max is a pretty level-headed guy, were I to guess, he is treating this period as working on stuff that he does not plan to do, in the same way we've talked about, like the difference in the shots Dalton Knecht takes when surrounded by LeBron, AD, D'Lo, and Reeves are going to be different than when surrounded by Maxwell Lewis,
for sure,
Bronny, and down the line. Like there, and we all saw what happened during the 35-point explosion, but some of these are not shots that they are going to want Dalton Knecht taking unless absolutely necessary. And Dalton also strikes me as the guy that is confident enough to take those shots, but sensible if he has to, but sensible enough to realize don't do it unless you have to.
Maybe I shouldn't. Just because I can doesn't mean I should.
Right.
I would have liked to have seen. I'm just saying I would have felt a little more confident about Max going into the season with like a bit of a stronger go. He's going to have to be more assertive. Like the Lakers are going to need him to be a credible offensive presence on the floor. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that's something they're going to need. He can't just be a defensive presence. He needs to be the other thing as well. And then, we'll get into a little bit when we talk about Olivari. Some of the guys further down the roster, I'm a little concerned about the back end of the roster. If you need to, their top 9 when everybody's healthy is perfectly fine. And you actually have a 10th guy that's a credible rotation player. But if you need to draw on some of the players deeper down because you have 2 or 3 guys injured at once or whatever it might be, I was not wowed by the back end of the roster in the preseason.
Last thing on Christie before we go to the break. He needs to be taking as many catch and shoot threes as possible because that's where he's at his best. It is worth remembering that LeBron did not play for a lot of these games or a lot of extended minutes, and he's the best guy on the team at getting whoever those type of looks. That also plays a role in it. But again, I'm just counting on Christie. For lack of a better way of putting it, just common sense will reign.
I'm not too worried about it. All right, let's get into this the Olivari story because it's a cool one, both on just sort of on the surface and whatever. Is the more you dig around and see different social media posts that involve, he just seems like a really, really great young person and played well too. So there's that, and also says a couple things about the way that the roster is shaping up. So we'll talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can enjoy the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So let's say you're watching a game and it just feels like you are anticipating every big play before it happens, the touchdown passes, the turnovers, big busted run, whatever. You can confirm your hunches with the latest stats, the live play-by-play, and all sorts of other info on the same page where you would place your bets. So you got all that info streamlined, and you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And the NBA season is just around the corner. Our friends at FanDuel has options for you. As of this recording, going through the West, the Thunder are 3-1 favorites to win the conference, followed by the Wolves, Mavs, and Nuggets, all at 5-1. Some other teams in the West, the Grizzlies 16-1, Lakers 19-1, Warriors 21-1, and the Pelicans and Kings tied at 22-1. That's FanDuel.com.
So again, if you missed it, the Lakers did make a minor roster move at the end of training camp. They cut Colin Castleton and gave his 2-way contract to Quincy Olivari, who played very well.
Yes, he did.
In the two games that he got of extended run. Hit a bunch of shots, moved well, good energy, just played well. And clearly the Lakers liked what they saw because they kept him.
It speaks to a few things. First of all, and this was something in the piece that Dave McMenamin from ESPN in writing about Olivari getting this contract, I think it reflects that they are reasonably, if not very confident that Christian Koloko is not just going to get his medical clearance from the league, but pretty soon, because they are low on size right now with Christian Wood and Vando out and Castleton waived. I was disturbed.
Even emergent, even if you don't really want to play Castleton, he is a person.
Right. I frankly was getting disturbed by how many minutes Jackson Hayes got in this final preseason game. I was just like, just let the team be under. I mean, you lost by 58. Who cares if you lose by 70? I'm like, just get Hayes out of there. Like Jackson Hayes right now is in his own right a very important player on this team. So I did not like seeing him get 21 minutes in this totally meaningless game on Friday. But that being said, I think it means they're pretty confident Koloko will be available fairly soon, and I'm guessing he's maintained his conditioning, all that stuff.
I mean, he hasn't played NBA basketball it'll be almost 20 months or something like that by the time. So they're maintained his conditioning, sure. But, when he's cleared, you're still looking reasonably probably at least 2 or 3 weeks before you can play him.
Sure. I imagine he's been doing what he can to just stay in the loop as much as he can.
In better shape than us. That's not.
I'm also, side note, happy for Bronny that Quincy Olivari managed to get this spot, because after that performance on Friday, I can't tell you how many people either in the comments section of the YouTube page or hitting us up on Twitter at Cam Brothers were furious at the prospect of Bronny having his contract while Quincy Olivari might end up playing for another team's G League team. So, and look, if we're being honest, Olivari looks much readier to step on the court than Bronny. He looks more ready to step on the court than Maxwell Lewis.
My thing is that I would cut actually Maxwell Lewis before I would cut Bronny.
I know, but
Maxwell Lewis. That's not you're not talking about our perception. You're talking about perception.
I'm talking about how the world works. And
exactly. No,
Maxwell Lewis, not enough people know about him for him to catch strays, whether he should be the one catching the strays or not. So I'm actually happy for Bronny, who, by the way, other than Olivari, was the only other Laker who played well in this Friday preseason game. Bronny had by far his best game, I think, since signing with the Lakers. So that was nice. And he said it gives him some confidence heading into the season. But it is also, too, this was something you texted to me. You can talk about this. It may not be an apples to apples comp or situation, but it is not the most ringing endorsement of JHS that this team that is already pretty guard heavy would bring in one more guard with their two ways.
Again, it's not, they don't play the same position. It's not, whatever, but it's
well, they play close enough to the same position.
Right. They are literally adjacent to each other. But it does tell me that, and the preseason told me, again, another guy who started that, that first game, you're like, ooh, okay. And then by the end of it, you were like, I mean, he played a little better than on Friday than he did on Thursday, but playing worse than he did on Thursday would have been damn near impossible because he was terrible. But it is a clear indication that they do not believe that if you need to break glass in case of emergency on a guard for 2 or 3 games or whatever it might be, that they believe that Hood Schifino can do that. It also says that they don't want to carry Hood Schifino on the active roster if it probably just a little bit of conjecture, if it means he's not down in the G League missing game. Like, I think they see he needs to play. And if you have one of those guys that is you can bring up because you think you might need 8 minutes, but you don't know, you can do that with Olivari and let Hood Schifino go play. And so it's not a ringing endorsement. I don't think.
That was something I actually asked JHS about during media day, just given how much time he missed last season with different injuries, didn't play in the summer league, recovering from the back surgery. If he knew whether or not the plan was for him to spend more time with the big club, with the G League team, and even split whatever, he said he didn't know. I don't know if he was being fully transparent or not. I don't care if he was or wasn't. And he may truly have not known. Yeah, but I agree with you by now, a month after we had that conversation, I agree with you. He needs a lot of G League reps. It's also just a great story, man, for all
That's
of our.
the last thing I want to say. Signed with sort of no real expectation. You got one of the Exhibit 10s, I believe, which is designed to really help you get to the G League. A little extra money, so one team can try to lure you to their G League group as opposed to another, but with no expectation of making the team in any way, shape, or form. And he really took advantage of the opportunities that were given to him.
There, over our Twitter feed at Cam Brothers, I retweeted this clip of him talking about how after this preseason game against the Warriors, he talked a bit with Steph Curry. Steph told him how much he liked his game. And, Olivari's young enough to have idolized Steph when he was a kid. And that was the case. Like, Steph is his all-time favorite player. He talked about how he used to sleep as a kid underneath a Steph Curry jersey. And I mean, he is on the verge of tears talking about this. And he was asked, I think, something to the effect of, what comes next. And he said, I don't know. I just want a job. It's like, I just want an NBA job. And, there's also something I tweeted out about how when he was at Xavier, like some little kid won like a raffle where you get to meet Quincy Olivari, and I think it was for an autograph or something, whatever. Yeah, something like that. And the mom gave the wrong address on this raffle form, and Olivari managed to get in touch with the mom, found out the right address, and drove on his own time to this little girl's house so she could hand deliver the autograph that she won. Yeah, he seems like an incredibly good kid, and just the gratitude in the way that he's talked about all of this, and the fact that he truly earned it. It's really awesome, man. It's really cool to see.
Castleton, obviously, tough to see, guys, not rooting against Colin Castleton. I've described him as a 4A guy. And I think the biggest thing with him is that he didn't seem to get better from last year to this year. I don't think he got worse. No, but he didn't necessarily get better. And I think to stick, you got to show that, he's got skills, and he'll end up making a pretty good amount of money as a professional basketball player somewhere.
He lacks upside. He lacks upside. Like Traore, you can see the upside with him, even if you're not sure that it'll develop. Armel Traore has a lot of upside. Like, Olivari's done enough in training camp that makes you go, oh, okay. And Koloko was once an NBA player. Right. Like, you don't see it right now with
and it's just the holes. I also know what the holes are, and defensively, it's hard for him to hold up. And he's very good at what he's good at, and it wouldn't shock me if he caught on somewhere else. Certainly, if he wants to, he'll be on a G League roster somewhere, with possibility of working his way back up from there. But anyway, congratulations, Quincy Olivari. The regular season starts on Tuesday. We'll get you ready with a game preview of the Lakers and the Minnesota Timberwolves, the team that they are facing in that first game. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with over 25,000 subscribers. We'll see everyone tomorrow.
Reminder, Lakers Talk, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific time on 710 ESPN. I will be hosting. Now, you people.
We'll see you tomorrow.